The author, Robert Kiyosaki, introduces the central premise of the book. He had two fathers, a rich one and a poor one. His poor dad was his biological father, who was highly educated, holding a PhD and completing advanced studies at prestigious universities on scholarships. He was successful in his career as an educator, working hard and earning a substantial income, yet struggled financially throughout his life and left bills upon his death. In contrast, his rich dad was the father of his best friend, who never finished the 8th grade but became one of the richest men in Hawaii, leaving millions to his family, charities, and church. Both men were strong, charismatic, and influential, offering advice that was often contradictory, particularly regarding money and the recommended course of study. Having these two contrasting viewpoints forced the author to think critically, compare, and choose his own path, which he found to be a more valuable process in the long run than simply accepting or rejecting a single perspective. The stark differences in their views are highlighted by contrasting statements, such as one saying, "The love of money is the root of all evil," while the other claimed, "The lack of money is the root of all evil." One advised studying hard to find a good company to work for, while the other suggested studying hard to find a good company to buy. One believed their home was their largest investment and greatest asset, while the other considered his house a liability and believed having it as your largest investment meant you were in trouble. There were also contrasting views on taxes, saving, risks, and self-reliance. The author observed that people shape their lives through their thoughts, noting that his poor dad's belief that he would never be rich became his reality, whereas his rich dad referred to himself as rich, famously stating, "There is a difference between being poor and being broke. Broke is temporary and poor is eternal." While his poor dad often claimed money didn't matter, his rich dad declared, "Money is power." At the age of 9, influenced by feeling like a poor kid compared to his rich schoolmates, the author decided to listen to and learn from his rich dad about money. This decision to follow a different path than the one his highly educated father recommended was painful but ultimately shaped the rest of his life. He likens this choice to taking the road not taken in Robert Frost's poem, emphasizing that this less traveled path made all the difference. The book's purpose is to convey the 6 main lessons that the rich dad taught the author over a period of 30 years, starting from when he was 9. These lessons are presented simply, as they were originally taught. The overarching message introduced is that money is a form of power, but financial education is even more powerful. Money may come and go, but understanding how it works provides power over it to build wealth. The author suggests that simply having positive thinking doesn't work financially, because most people haven't learned how money works and thus spend their lives working for Moan. Chapter 1, titled Lesson 1, The Rich Don't Work for Money. The book begins by establishing its purpose, to provide insights on a different kind of education about money, one that the traditional school system does not teach. The author explains that it is foolish to assume school will prepare children for the financial world they will face. They need more, different education, and need to understand the different sets of rules governing money. There are rules the rich play by and rules the other 95% of the population plays by, learned at home and in school. The author decided it was best to teach children to play it smart, not just safe. The core of the book is presented as the story of the author's 2 dads, a rich one and a poor one, and the 6 main lessons the rich dad taught him over 30 years, starting when the author was 9 years old. The first lesson is explicitly stated as Lesson 1, The Rich Don't Work for Money. This decision to learn from his rich dad rather than his highly educated poor dad was a painful but life-shaping choice compared to the path less traveled in Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. The practical introduction to this lesson began when the author, as a 9-year-old boy, asked his friend Mike's dad, who became his rich dad, to teach him how to be rich. Rich Dad's offer was not classroom-style learning but experiential. Work for him and he would teach them. If they didn't work, he wouldn't teach them. He emphasized the importance of making quick, decisive decisions as opportunities come and go. The pay offered was just 10 cents an hour, working for 3 hours every Saturday at one of his superettes. The initial work was excruciatingly boring, dusting cans for 3 hours. After 3 weeks, the author felt disappointed, as 30 cents wasn't much, even in the mid-1950s. This frustration led to a pivotal conversation with Rich Dad. The author questioned the low pay and suggested Rich Dad was cheap. Rich Dad challenged the author's point of view, stating that blaming him, the problem outside, meant the author had to change Rich Dad. However, realizing you're the problem allows you to change yourself, learn, and grow wiser. Quitting a job because of low pay or lack of respect is what most people do, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem. Rich Dad explained that fear is what keeps most people working at a job: fear of not paying bills, fear of being fired, fear of not having enough money, fear of starting over. This fear makes most people slaves to money. Learning to have money work for you is presented as a completely different course of study. The experience of working for 10 cents an hour was intended to give the 9-year-olds a taste of what it feels like to work for money and how most people spend their lives doing just that. Rich Dad also highlighted that employees often feel their paychecks aren't enough, especially after taxes. The government taxes income, spending, saving, and even when you die. To further illustrate the lesson and test their resolve, Rich Dad offered increasing amounts of pay: $0.25, $1, $2, and $5 an hour. This created a strong internal conflict, showing the part of their soul that could be bought, wanting the money for things like a new bicycle or baseball glove and peer admiration, versus the part that was strong and could not be bought. Rich Dad observed this struggle, knowing he was testing which part was stronger. He noted that he tested people this way every time he interviewed someone for a job. The conversation continued, highlighting how often emotions, particularly fear of not having money, drive people's thinking, "I need to find a job." Rich Dad argued that a job is merely a short-term solution to a long-term problem. He suggested that recommendations like stay in school, get good grades, so you can find a safe, secure job are primarily made out of fear. The key is to learn to choose your thoughts rather than simply reacting to your emotions. Instead of running out the door driven by fear, one should take time to ask questions like, is working harder at this the best solution to this problem? This kind of questioning breaks the emotional thought pattern and allows for clear thinking. Rich Dad explained that the rich actually make money, they don't work for it. He described money as an illusion, like a carrot for a donkey, held together by fear, greed, confidence, and the ignorance of the masses. This early experience working for 10 cents an hour was the beginning of understanding how to have money work for them, rather than working for money, which is fundamentally about control and power. If you work for money, you give power to your employer. If your money works for you, you keep and control the power. Chapter 2 begins with 9-year-old Robert telling his father that he and his friend Mike were called poor kids by their wealthy classmates and asking his father how to get rich. His highly educated father, referred to as the poor dad, tells him he needs to learn to make money and use his head. Robert and Mike, feeling poor compared to the other kids at their school, decide to form a partnership to make money. Their first attempt involves making counterfeit nickels out of melted lead, which is quickly shut down by Robert's poor dad, who explains it's illegal. When Robert asks his poor dad why he isn't rich, his dad explains that he chose to be a school teacher and doesn't know how to make money. He then suggests that Robert and Mike talk to Mike's dad, referred to as the rich dad, who his banker raves about as being brilliant with money. This surprises Mike because his family doesn't have a nice car or house like the rich kids, but Robert's dad explains that a nice car and house don't necessarily mean someone is rich or knows how to make money, and that Mike's dad seems to be building an empire. Mike's dad agrees to meet with them, and they arrive at his small, simple, but tidy home, which also seems to serve as an office. They see several people working for Mike's dad, including a construction supervisor, warehouse manager, and restaurant managers, indicating he has various businesses. Mike asks his dad if he will teach them to make money. The rich dad's initial offer is to pay them 10 cents an hour for repetitive, tedious work dusting cans in his store. Both boys are disappointed, expecting something more exciting after 3 weeks of this work. Robert wants to quit and is supported by his poor dad, who sees it as exploitation and advises him to demand more pay or quit. However, Mike goes back to his dad alone, as instructed. When Robert meets with the rich dad again, feeling frustrated and exploited by the low pay, the rich dad explains that the low pay was deliberate. He states that life pushes everyone around, but only a few learn and move on, while others get angry and fight against their boss or job. He emphasizes that the problem is not the boss or the job, but within oneself, and blaming others prevents learning. He uses the frustrating experience with the low pay to explain the difference in mindset between the rich and the poor middle class. The latter work for money, while the rich have money work for them. The rich dad then tests the boys by offering them increasing wages, 25 cents, then $1, $2, and finally $5 an hour. Robert experiences strong internal conflict, his desire for the money screaming at him, but his mouth stays silent. The rich dad recognizes that both fear of not having money and desire for money and the things it can buy are powerful emotions that can be manipulated, like a carrot to a donkey. He explains that most people allow their emotions to do their thinking and react impulsively, often driven by fear of not having enough money. This fear leads them to seek a job, which the rich dad calls a short-term solution to a long-term problem. He contrasts this with choosing your thoughts and asking questions like, how can I afford it, which forces the brain to work, as opposed to saying, I can't afford it, which stops the brain. He explains that ignorance about money intensifies both fear and desire, leading people into a trap where they constantly chase money without understanding how it works. While school is important for learning skills to be a contributing member of society, it often doesn't teach financial skills, leaving people unprepared for the real world. The rich dad's goal with the low pay was to provide a memorable lesson that would help them avoid the trap of working hard for money, living in fear of bills, and seeking the illusion of job security. The rich dad teaches them that the rich make money rather than simply working for it using legal methods. He explains that money itself is an illusion, held together by the fear and greed of billions of people who believe it is real. Finally, after they stop working for the 10 cents, the rich dad tells them to forget about needing a paycheck and to keep using their brains, even working for free initially. He promises that their minds will show them ways of making money far beyond what he could pay them, helping them see opportunities others miss because they are fixated on money and security. This leads to Robert and Mike observing Mrs. Martin at the convenience store cutting the covers off old comic books and throwing the rest away. They realize they can get the comic books for free from the distributor if they don't resell them. They start a comic book library in Mike's basement, charging other kids 10 cents admission. They hire Mike's younger sister as a librarian, paying her a small wage. This venture generates an average of $9.50 per week for 3 months, demonstrating their first practical success in having money work for them, independent of an employer. Although the business eventually closes after a fight, the rich dad is happy because they learned their first lesson well. They learned to have money work for them by being forced to use their imagination to identify opportunities and start their own business, thereby controlling their own finances. Chapter 3, titled Lesson 2, Why Teach Financial Literacy, shifts the focus from the initial experience of working for money to the fundamental importance of understanding financial concepts. The chapter opens by referencing a meeting of some of America's richest businessmen in 1923, just before the 1929 market crash. 25 years later, many of these men had met tragic financial ends, died penniless, broke, committed suicide, or were in prison. The author suggests that while the Great Depression likely had a significant impact, the point is that even successful people can face financial ruin, especially in times of rapid change. He argues that too many people focus too much on money itself rather than their greatest wealth, their education. Intelligence is what solves problems and produces money. Money without intelligence is easily lost. The traditional school system often teaches people to work for money, but fails to teach them how to have money work for them. This sets the stage for Lesson 2, Why Teach Financial Literacy. According to the rich dad, the primary reason people struggle financially is their lack of financial education. He states that the number one rule for becoming rich is to know the difference between an asset and a liability, and buy assets. This simple rule, though seemingly absurdly easy, is profound and often missed by most people. Rich dad defines an asset as something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability as something that takes money out of your pocket. He emphasizes that understanding this difference is not based on dictionary definitions or accounting jargon used by professionals, but on reading the numbers and understanding the cash flow pattern they represent. The numbers tell a story. He illustrates this with cash flow diagrams. An asset's cash flow shows money coming into the income column. A liability's cash flow shows money going out to the expense column. The chapter explains how the poor and middle class often fall into the rat race. They get jobs, income, but acquire liabilities like mortgages, car loans, credit card debt that generate expenses, mistakenly believing these liabilities are assets. This cycle means that even with increased income, their expenses and debts also increase, keeping them trapped. More money seldom solves someone's money problems. Intelligence solves problems. The core issue is often their spending habits and lack of financial literacy. The rich dad identifies fear of not paying bills, being fired, not having enough money, starting over, and desire for comfort, luxury items as the primary emotions that drive most people to work for money and stay in the trap. These emotions can be manipulated, like a carrot to a donkey, leading people to work harder but never escape. Ignorance about money intensifies both fear and desire. Instead of allowing emotions to control thinking and reacting impulsively, like simply getting up and going to work because bills are due, the rich dad teaches the importance of choosing your thoughts and asking questions like, how can I afford it? This forces the brain to work and find solutions beyond just working harder for a paycheck, which is only a short-term solution to a long-term problem. The chapter also touches upon the power of self-knowledge, the mirror, in Japanese legend. People often conform to popular financial opinions. Your home is an asset, get a safe job, due to the fear of being different, criticized, or ostracized, rather than questioning these ideas and trusting their own inner wisdom. Ultimately, the chapter emphasizes that financial literacy, the ability to understand assets, liabilities, and cash flow, is crucial to escaping the trap of working for money and instead learning how to have money work for you. Chapter 4, titled Lesson 3, Mind Your Own Business, focuses on the critical principle of building and maintaining your own financial foundation, distinct from your primary job or profession. The chapter prominently features the story of Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. In 1974, Kroc spoke to an MBA class at the University of Texas, and when asked about his business, surprised the students by stating he was not in the hamburger business, but in the real estate business. He explained that while selling hamburger franchises was the main business plan, he always emphasized the location of each franchise. Kroc understood that the real estate was the most significant factor for the success of each franchise, and that the franchise owners were, in essence, buying the land under the franchise for his organization. This focus on real estate led McDonald's to become the largest single owner of real estate in the world, possessing valuable locations globally. This anecdote serves as a powerful illustration of Lesson 3. Mind your own business. The author asserts that financial struggle is often a direct result of people spending their entire lives working for someone else. People work for the owners of the company that employs them, for the government through taxes, and for the bank that holds their mortgage. This pattern can leave many people with very little at the end of their working lives. The core message is to concentrate on building your own asset column. Instead of merely working diligently for money, the emphasis is on actively acquiring assets that generate income for you, thus making money work for you. The Ray Kroc story highlights how even in a product-focused business, the strategic acquisition of assets, real estate, can be the true underlying business. Rich Dad taught Mike and the author this same lesson. The secret is mind your own business. He advised that people could keep their daytime jobs but should continue to build that asset column. He conceptualizes a dollar that goes into your asset column as becoming your employee, capable of working 24 hours a day for generations. It is crucial to never let a dollar leave the asset column once it enters. An important distinction highlighted in this chapter is how the rich, poor, and middle class handle luxuries. Rich people buy luxuries last, after their asset column generates sufficient income to afford them. In contrast, the poor and middle class often buy luxuries first, frequently using debt because they want to look rich. These purchases, like big houses or expensive cars bought on credit, are liabilities that push them deeper into debt. The author uses the example of his wife buying a Mercedes only after the cash flow from their apartment houses increased enough to pay for it, making it a true reward for growing their asset column. Buying luxuries on credit impulsively can lead to resenting the item due to the financial burden. The chapter implies that once you have invested in and built your own business, meaning your asset column, you are ready for the magic touch or biggest secret of the rich, which gives them a significant advantage. This concept serves as a lead-in to the next lesson, suggesting that building your asset column is a prerequisite for unlocking further financial power. Working for others without building your own assets means your income is primarily subject to taxes. The author notes that financial struggle is often a direct result of working for others, including the government through taxes. An employee with a safe, secure job but without financial aptitude has no escape from this cycle. Chapter 5 delves into the history of taxation and introduces the concept of using corporations as a powerful tool for wealth building, highlighting the advantages they offer, particularly concerning taxes. The chapter opens by contrasting the common perception of Robin Hood with Rich Dad's view. The author's schoolteacher saw Robin Hood as a heroic figure who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. Rich Dad, however, considered Robin Hood a crook. Rich Dad argued that this idea of Robin Hood, or taking from the rich to give to the poor, has actually caused the most pain for the poor and the middle class, leading to them being heavily taxed. Rich Dad then explains the history of taxes. Originally in both England and America, taxes were temporary, typically levied only to pay for wars. Permanent income tax was introduced in England in 1874 and in the United States in 1913 with the adoption of the 16th Amendment. Crucially, Rich Dad emphasizes that these income taxes were initially levied only against the rich. The poor and middle class supported these taxes because they were told they were created only to punish the rich. They voted for the law, making it constitutionally legal. However, once the government got a taste of money, the appetite grew. The demand for money increased, and the tax the rich idea was adjusted to include lower income levels, down to the very people who voted it in, the poor and the middle class. The source explains that while the poor and middle class bore an increasing tax burden, true capitalists used their financial knowledge to simply find a way to escape. They achieved this by heading back to the protection of a corporation. The chapter clarifies what a corporation is. It is not a physical thing like a big building, a factory, or a group of people. It is merely a file folder with some legal documents in it, registered with a state government agency. It is a legal body without a soul. The use of corporations became popular again once permanent income tax laws were passed because the income tax rate of the corporation was less than the individual income tax rates. Additionally, corporations offered the significant advantage of allowing certain expenses to be paid with pre-tax dollars. The chapter contrasts this with employees who earn and get taxed, and they try to live on what is left. A corporation, on the other hand, earns, spends everything it can, and is taxed on what is left. This offers a tremendous advantage in wealth building compared to being an employee or a small business sole proprietor. The author characterizes the situation as a war between the haves and have-nots that goes on whenever and wherever laws are made. The uninformed are the ones who lose in this battle. They get up every day and diligently go to work and pay taxes. Rich Dad explains that the rich do not simply comply when taxes are increased, they react. They use their money, power, and intent to change things. They search for ways to minimize their tax burden. They hire smart attorneys and accountants and persuade politicians to change laws or create legal loopholes. It was less expensive to pay these professionals than to pay the government. The U.S. tax code allows for tax savings through various vehicles, many of which are available to anyone, but it's the rich who typically utilize them because they are minding their own business. The 1031 exchange for real estate is given as an example, allowing taxes on capital gains to be delayed by exchanging for a more expensive property. The author notes that many people pay more taxes or take fewer deductions than necessary because they are afraid of the government tax agent. His poor dad never fought back, but his rich dad played the game smarter, primarily through corporations. The first lesson learned from Rich Dad about having money work for you rather than working for money is linked to power. Working for money gives your power to your employer, while having money work for you allows you to keep and control that power. To not be bullied by the tax man or others, you need to know the law and how the system works. Rich Dad knew the law because it was expensive to not know the law. He believed that being smart meant you wouldn't be pushed around as much. The chapter contrasts the advice of the two dads. The author's educated poor dad encouraged him to seek a good job with a strong corporation and work his way up the corporate ladder. Rich Dad, upon hearing this, simply chuckled and asked, "Why not own the ladder?" This question encapsulates the shift in perspective taught by Rich Dad. Don't just work for a corporation. Understand how to own and use one to your financial advantage. Finally, the chapter reinforces that financial IQ involves four broad areas of expertise: accounting, investing, understanding markets, and law. Utilizing a corporation is specifically mentioned as part of the law component that can aid explosive growth due to its tax advantages and protection. Chapter 6. This chapter introduces the concept that the rich actively create or invent money rather than simply working for it. This lesson builds upon the earlier principle of having money work for you. The chapter opens by contrasting two historical and contemporary examples. One, the story of Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone and offered to sell his patent and small company to Western Union for $100,000. Western Union's president scoffed at him and turned him down, saying the price was ridiculous, missing out on the creation of a multi-billion-dollar industry. 2, a news story about a downsizing at a local company, showing angry workers, including a terminated manager afraid of losing his house. This juxtaposition highlights the fundamental difference between those who create immense value and opportunity, like Bell, initially, and those who are dependent on working for an employer, subject to events like downsizing. Rich Dad taught that the rich really do make money and that they do not work for it. He used the example of Mike and the author casting lead 5-cent pieces. He said they were very close to thinking the way the rich think, but it was illegal. This implies that inventing money involves finding legal ways to create financial value. A key insight is that money is often seen as an illusion by the rich, like a carrot for the donkey. The illusion of money is held together by billions of people thinking that money is real, driven by fear and greed. Money is really made up, and the illusion is maintained by the illusion of confidence and the ignorance of the masses. This perspective suggests that financial success isn't just about accumulating physical currency, but understanding and leveraging the underlying system. To successfully invent money and achieve financial freedom, the author emphasizes that financial genius requires two crucial components. One, technical knowledge. This refers to financial intelligence or financial IQ, which includes understanding accounting, financial literacy, reading numbers and financial statements, investing, understanding markets, supply and demand, technical and fundamental aspects, and law, especially utilizing entities like corporations for tax advantages and protection. Knowing the law is essential, as it's expensive to not know the law. 2, courage. This is presented as overcoming internal obstacles like self-doubt, excessive fear, cynicism, bad habits, and arrogance. The author notes that often, it's not a lack of technical information, but a lack of self-confidence that holds people back. Excessive fear and self-doubt are considered the greatest detractors of personal genius. In the real world, it's often the bold who get ahead, not just the smart. The chapter specifically addresses the obstacle of fear, particularly the fear of losing money. Everyone, including the rich, experiences this fear, but the difference lies in how fear, losing, and failure are handled. Rich Dad's advice for the phobia of losing money is, if you hate risk and worry, start early. Starting to save or invest young can mitigate this fear. The author uses the story of the Alamo to illustrate how winners can turn a failure or loss into inspiration and a rallying cry, becoming stronger and smarter. Winners are not afraid of losing because they know losing will only inspire them to improve. In contrast, most people struggle financially because they play not to lose rather than play to win. Another obstacle is cynicism, which Rich Dad says cynics never win. Unchecked doubt and fear create cynics who criticize instead of analyze. Analysis opens eyes, allowing winners to see opportunities others miss, while criticism blinds. The focus on I don't wants, like not wanting to fix toilets in real estate, is seen as a manifestation of this cynicism and fear that prevents people from pursuing potentially lucrative opportunities. In essence, Lesson 5. The Rich Invent Money teaches that creating wealth is a combination of understanding the financial landscape, technical knowledge, having the bravery to act despite fear and doubt, courage, and actively seeking ways to create value and generate income through assets and legal structures, rather than solely relying on earning a paycheck by working for others. It reinforces the idea that money is an idea, and that changing one's thinking is the first step to generating more money. Chapter 7, titled Lesson 6, Work to Learn, Don't Work for Money. This chapter emphasizes that true long-term financial success comes from seeking work primarily for the learning and skills acquired, rather than solely for the paycheck. It contrasts the traditional advice of getting a secure job and specializing with Rich Dad's perspective on acquiring diverse skills. The chapter opens with an anecdote about an interview the author gave in Singapore with a talented young female reporter who desired to be a best-selling author. She was a great writer with a master's degree in English literature, but her novels weren't selling. When the author suggested she attend a sales training course, she was offended, stating she was a professional trained not to be a salesperson and that she hated salespeople. The author pointed out that he was a best-selling author, not necessarily the best writing author, implying his success was due to combining writing talent with sales and marketing skills, which he learned, whereas she focused only on her writing skill. This interaction highlights the core lesson. Great talent is often not enough. Skills in areas like sales and marketing are crucial for financial success, even for talented individuals. The author argues that focusing solely on specialization, as often encouraged in traditional education and workplaces, in order to make more money or get promoted, you need to specialize, can lead to being trapped and dependent on that specialty. His educated poor dad believed in specializing and working your way up the corporate ladder. Rich Dad, however, advised to know a little about a lot and learn all aspects of a business. The author provides personal examples of choosing jobs for the learning experience. He resigned from a high-paying job with Standard Oil to join the Marine Corps to learn leadership. The hardest part of running a company is managing people. Leadership is what you need to learn next. After returning from Vietnam, he joined Xerox Corp for 4 years specifically to overcome his shyness and learn sales, which he considered the most frightening subject in the world. He stayed until he consistently ranked in the top 5 in sales, then resigned. These choices were not driven by immediate pay, but by the strategic acquisition of skills, even if it meant a temporary pay cut. Rich Dad congratulated him for these choices, while his educated dad was bewildered or ashamed. The chapter lists the four broad areas of expertise that make up financial IQ, previously mentioned in Chapter 4. 1. Accounting financial literacy, the ability to read and understand financial statements to identify business strengths and weaknesses. 2. Investing, understanding strategies and formulas for making money work for you. 3. Understanding markets, knowing the science of supply and demand, including both technical, emotion-driven, and fundamental economic sense aspects. 4. Law, utilizing legal structures like corporations for tax advantages and protection. Combining these skills makes it easier to make money with money. However, the author strongly emphasizes that management skills are crucial for starting one's own business or succeeding financially, especially for those not specializing within a unionized field. The three most important management skills are: 1. The management of cash flow. 2. The management of systems, including oneself and time. 3. The management of people. Among specialized skills, sales and understanding marketing are highlighted as the most important. The ability to sell and communicate effectively with others, customers, employees, etc., is the base skill of personal success. Communication skills like writing, speaking, and negotiating are crucial. Overcoming the fear of rejection is often the primary obstacle to mastering sales and marketing. The chapter also touches upon the importance of being both good students and good teachers. Rich Dad believed in giving first, give and you shall receive, including giving away money, which he saw as a secret to receiving money. This contrasted with Poor Dad, who said he would give when I have some extra money, which never happened. Ultimately, the lesson is to seek opportunities to learn skills, particularly management, sales, and marketing, rather than just chasing higher pay or job security through narrow specialization. This broader skill set allows individuals to build their own asset column and achieve financial freedom, rather than being trapped in the rat race of working for others and constantly paying bills. The author notes that highly specialized individuals, like doctors or teachers, often need union protection or face financial struggles if they lack these broader business and sales skills. Chapter 8, titled Overcoming Obstacles. This chapter addresses the reality that even financially literate individuals may face roadblocks to becoming financially independent and building abundant asset columns. It identifies 5 main reasons why this occurs: 1. Fear. 2. Cynicism. 3. Laziness. 4. Bad habits. 5. Arrogance. The chapter then delves into some of these obstacles in detail. Reason number 1. Overcoming the fear of losing money. The author states that no one truly enjoys losing money, and all rich people he has met have lost money at some point. Conversely, he has met many poor people who have never lost a dime investing. The fear of losing money is real and experienced by everyone, including the rich. However, the key difference lies in how you handle that fear, how you handle losing, and how you handle failure. Rich Dad offered a simple solution to the phobia of losing money. If you hate risk and worry, start early. Starting to save or invest when young can make it much easier. The concept of compound interest is mentioned as powerful, illustrated by the immense value the initial $24 investment for Manhattan Island would be worth today if compounded annually. The chapter uses the story of the Alamo as a powerful illustration of how to handle failure and loss. Despite being a tragic military defeat, Texans turned this failure into inspiration, a rallying cry, remember the Alamo, and a way to become stronger and smarter. Rich Dad used this story when nervous before a big deal to remind himself that he could turn a financial loss into a financial win. He wasn't afraid of making mistakes or losing money because he knew he would take the loss and make it a win. This knowledge gave him courage. Winners are not afraid of losing because they understand that losing only inspires them to improve and become better. John D. Rockefeller is quoted as saying, "I always tried to turn every disaster into an opportunity." Similarly, the defeat at Pearl Harbor became a rallying cry that gave America strength. Failure inspires winners, while it defeats losers. This is presented as a key secret of winners that losers do not grasp. Winning means being unafraid to lose, because you know who you are and that losing will motivate you. Most people struggle financially primarily because they play not to lose rather than play to win. They play life financially too safe and too small, buying liabilities like big houses and cars instead of big investments. Arrogance, while not detailed as extensively as fear within the provided Chapter 8 excerpts, arrogance is listed as one of the 5 main obstacles. Later sources elaborate on this. The author suggests that arrogance combined with intelligence can equal ignorance when a new idea challenges their existing thoughts. Arrogant people are often described as having low self-esteem and being afraid of taking risks. They typically avoid learning opportunities like reading or listening to tapes because they believe they already know everything. A truly intelligent person, in contrast, welcomes new ideas to enhance their understanding. This highlights how arrogance is an internal barrier to learning and growth, which are essential for financial success. While cynicism, laziness, and bad habits are listed as obstacles in the introduction to Chapter 8, detailed discussions specifically labeled under Chapter 8 for these points are not present in the provided sources. However, cynicism is briefly mentioned in the context of people saying things won't work because they are afraid. Chapter 9, titled Getting Started. This chapter transitions from identifying obstacles to providing a practical framework for beginning the journey toward financial independence. It emphasizes that acquiring wealth isn't necessarily easy, but finding deals can be. The key difficulty lies in the determination needed to push through the initial challenges. The core idea presented is to awaken your financial genius, which the author believes lies dormant within each person. This genius is often asleep because society and traditional education teach people to work for money and expect employers or the government to handle their financial future, rather than teaching them how to have money work for them. The common, easier path is to work hard, earn, spend, and borrow when necessary. The chapter offers 10 steps as a process to develop this financial genius based on the author's personal experience. These are presented as guideposts, and individuals are encouraged to create their own. The chapter details several of these steps. 1. I need a reason greater than reality, the power of spirit. This step highlights the importance of having a strong, compelling motivation that is powerful enough to overcome the perceived difficulties and challenges encountered in the pursuit of financial freedom. It's about having a reason that pushes you past the reality of a long road with hills to climb, contrasting it with the easier path of just working for money. An example is given of a young woman aspiring to swim for the Olympics, whose dream provided the necessary motivation to overcome the harsh reality of early morning practices and sacrifices. 2. Invest first in education. The author asserts that the mind is the only real asset one possesses and the most powerful tool. Everyone has the choice of what they put into their brain. Instead of just buying investments, people should first invest in learning about investing. The author attends seminars and listens to audio tapes, emphasizing the value of immersing oneself in a subject. Keeping an open mind is crucial, as demonstrated by the author listening repeatedly to Peter Lynch's ideas he initially disagreed with until he gained insight. This allows for developing multiple ways to analyze problems. Arrogance is presented as an obstacle here. Arrogant or critical people often have low self-esteem, fear taking risks, because learning involves making mistakes, and believe they already know everything, thus avoiding learning opportunities like reading or attending classes. 4. Master a formula and then learn a new one, the power of learning quickly. Making money, like baking bread, involves following a formula or recipe. The prevailing formula for most people is simply to work for money, pay bills, balance checkbooks, and maybe buy some traditional investments. If one is unhappy with their financial situation, the solution is to change the formula by which they make money. The author provides his own example of mastering the formula for buying real estate foreclosures, which generated millions, but later seeking faster formulas in other investment areas. In today's rapidly changing world, what you know is less important than how fast you learn, which is described as a priceless skill for finding new money-making formulas. 5. Pay yourself first, the power of self-discipline. This is deemed arguably the most difficult but also the most important step. A lack of self-discipline is identified as the primary factor distinguishing the rich from the poor and middle class. Without self-control, it's difficult to get rich, as seen with lottery winners who quickly go broke or people who spend raises immediately. The author states that the world pushes people around because they lack internal control. Key management skills for personal finance and business include the management of cash flow, people, and personal time. The principle is to allocate money to the asset column before paying monthly expenses. The author recounts paying himself first even when bills exceeded cash flow, despite advice from professionals, emphasizing the need for internal fortitude and guts to go against conventional wisdom and resist temptations like consumer debt or tax deductions for liabilities. Spending desire should be used to motivate investing, focusing on creating money rather than borrowing it. Money is a powerful force. With low financial intelligence, it controls you, but if you are smarter than money, it will obey you. 9. The need for heroes, the power of myth. Having heroes provides a powerful method of learning and inspiration. Emulating heroes, whether in sports or business, makes success seem attainable. If they can do it, so can I. and allows individuals to tap into a source of potential genius. Heroes make complex things look easy. For investing, finding heroes who simplify the process is recommended. 10. Teach and you shall receive, the power of giving. Both the author's dads were teachers. Rich Dad emphasized being charitable and giving money away first, believing it was the secret to receiving more. Poor Dad, conversely, waited until he had extra money to give, which rarely happened. The principle is that giving what you want, money, kindness, help, will result in receiving it back, often in greater measure. Rich Dad considered poor people more greedy because they often didn't give. The chapter also touches on other aspects of getting started, such as being true to yourself, not following the crowd, and the importance of being close to information, legal insider trading, through connections. It provides a story of using financial intelligence to buy real estate with minimal initial capital to fund a child's college education, illustrating how learning and strategy can achieve financial goals without simply working harder or saving traditionally. The chapter concludes by reiterating that financial success is determined by what is in your head, your ideas and intelligence, not just working hard. It is about learning to have money work for you, choosing to invest in your mind and assets with every dollar, and teaching this knowledge to the next generation. Chapter 10, titled Still Want More, here are some to-dos. This chapter is for individuals who want practical steps, to-dos, rather than just philosophical ideas. The author believes that understanding the philosophy is just as important as taking action, noting that some people want to do without thinking, while others think but don't do. The author considers himself both, loving new ideas and action. The chapter then shares some of the things I do, presented in an abbreviated form. Here are some of the key practical steps discussed. Stop doing what you're doing. This means taking a break to assess what is working and what is not. The chapter defines insanity as doing the same thing and expecting a different result. You should stop doing what isn't working and look for something new. Look for new ideas. The author suggests going to bookstores and looking for books on different and unique subjects, which he calls formulas. He buys how-to books on formulas he knows nothing about. An example given is finding and reading the book The 16% Solution by Joel Moskowitz. Take action. This step emphasizes the importance of actually putting into practice what you have learned. The author notes that this is where most people stop. He gives the example of immediately taking action the day after reading the 16% Solution and following its steps. Find someone who has done what you want to do. The suggestion is to take them to lunch and ask for tips and tricks of the trade. The author provides a personal example of finding a government employee who invested in tax lien certificates after reading the book and inviting her to lunch. She was happy to share everything she knew, and with her help, the author found 2 great properties and began accruing 16% interest the next day. This process took a day to read the book, a day to take action, an hour for lunch, and a day to acquire 2 great deals. Take classes and buy tapes. The author searches newspapers for new and interesting classes, many of which are free or low cost. He also attends and pays for expensive seminars on subjects he wants to learn. He states that he is wealthy and free from needing a job specifically because of the courses he took. He contrasts this with friends who told him he was wasting his money but are still at their same jobs. Make lots of offers. When looking for real estate, the author looks at many properties and generally writes an offer. He mentions that determining the right offer is the job of the real estate agent, and he aims to do as little work as possible. Walk, don't run. The author takes his time walking around neighborhoods looking for properties for sale or rent, which helps him get a feel for the area. For stocks, he recommends Peter Lynch's book Beating the Street for its formula for selecting stocks that grow in value. He believes the principles of finding value are the same regardless of the asset class, real estate, stocks, etc. You need to know what you are looking for and then go look for it. Understand why consumers will always be poor. This point highlights a key difference in behavior. Consumers stock up when the supermarket has a sale, but run away when the stock market has a sale, crash, or correction. Conversely, consumers shop elsewhere when the supermarket raises prices, but start buying when the stock market raises its prices. Look in the right places. The author contrasts his approach with his neighbor's. His neighbor bought an identical condominium for $100,000 from a real estate broker who owned no property. The author bought his for $50,000 by shopping at the foreclosure department of a bank after taking a $500 class on the process. The neighbor thought the $500 class was too expensive and couldn't afford the time, while the author learned that profit is made when you buy, not when you sell. Look for people who want to buy first, then look for someone who wants to sell. An example is given where a friend wanted land. The author found a larger piece, secured it with an option, sold a portion to his friend, and kept the remaining land for free. The moral is to buy the pie and cut it in pieces. Most people look for what they can afford, thinking small, buy only a piece of the pie, and end up paying more for less. Small thinkers don't get big breaks. Think bigger first. To get richer, you must think bigger first. Retailers offer volume discounts to big spenders. Even if you are small, you can think big. The author describes buying computers and stocks in larger quantities with friends to negotiate better deals. He states that small people remain small because they think small, act alone, or don't act at all. Learn from history. The chapter notes that all big companies started small. Examples include Colonel Sanders, who got rich after losing everything in his 60s, and Bill Gates, who was one of the richest men before age 30. Action always beats inaction. The chapter concludes by reiterating that you must take action before you can receive financial rewards. The final encouragement is act now. The author emphasizes that these are just a few of the things he has done and continues to do to recognize opportunities. The important words are done and do.